So in order to make the two pencil boxes, I've cut some material already. So I had some poplar lying around and I've just sliced them down using my bandsaw, and then with the planer I've just surfaced them nice and flat. It's not 100% smooth yet. We'll get to that when we get to the sanding bit, but for now it's nice and flat, and I have 4 pieces to work with at the moment. So now that we've cut the 2 side pieces and I've labelled them 1 and 2 for the 2 different sets, I want to work out the end caps are going to go onto that. The size I want to go for is roughly 3 inches. So I will use the other piece of wood I have. I will cut 3 inches 4 times to get the repeatable, and I'll be using a stop block on the crosscut sled just to get repeated cuts. And then we can work out how we're going to do the miters on each of these. Yep. And on this crosscut sled there's already a 45 degree cut being made on this, so it should just slide through nicely. We need to lower the blade slightly. So that should just slide in there quite nicely. So we're going to do the side pieces first, and what I will do, I will just use both of these pieces together like so, to just make sure I have them lined up, and we'll just cut a angle all the way down. So these are the pieces that we've cut using the miter sled, and we're just going to do a quick dry test to see how each of the angles look. So now that we've done the dry test, I'm just going to simply glue this up, and to help me clamp it together I'm going to be using this masking tape, just to allow me to have something to hold on to. Take your time and try to get this as accurate as possible. The reason being, it just makes your life a lot easier with the glue up. And I don't know why every time I do a glue up it does seem a little bit stressful, so let's hope this one goes quite well. And this is the reason why I use the tape, because the tape just gives you an extra hand to keep all the pieces together and stop them from moving around. And the next thing is just do some ordinary wood glue to get this in place. Probably don't need this much glue, but I just find that I'd rather be safe than not have enough in there. But yeah, it should be plenty strong for what it's going to do, and we will add some strength into this later on. So we simply just lift, and the tape is holding it in place. Let me just pull this one back a little bit and then get this in place. So what I like to do before I close it, I like to keep it flat down on a flat surface before I do the last bit of tape. So I'm just going to put this extra bit off. And again, you have time, so don't rush. The glue isn't going to set within seconds. But you can see the joints are nice and closed. Just get this glue out of the way. And if you did line them up correctly on the masking tape, it really shouldn't be much of an issue to keep them nice and flat. But we will sand it down wherever there are some uneven bits. So that's pretty sturdy. That was an uneven surface there. But yeah, so what we want to do before the glue dries up, just quickly get something to just give it a wipe down. So for the lid, I'm going to inlay some of this purple heart in the actual lid. So I'll be cutting this in half and inlaying a strip of purple heart. But in order to get the right thickness, I'm going to use this as a gauge for the blade and set the fence to the right thickness. And I'm just going to line this up so you can see. It doesn't need to be 100% exact because I will be sanding it down and so on. So I will just do it about there. It gives us a bit of room to clean up if there's any imperfections or any teeth marks from the actual blade. So yeah, I'm literally just gonna rip this all the way down just to give us a nice piece to work with. And yeah, and then we'll be using this strip to inlay the lid and also the splines as well. So I've now cut the two middle poplar strips. I cut it in half so it's much more thinner. I do quite like this design, so I'm going to go ahead with this and just clean up any edges with the hand plane and then glue this up. So off camera, what I've done is I just planed both sides using the thicknesser. There's a few markings from where the rubber wheels leave markings, so I'll sand those off. They're nice and flat now. You can see this one's wider than this. It's just because it's not been trimmed down, so this is a bit more closer to the actual measurement. This will be trimmed either side to just get the right size, but I'll do that at a later stage. So this has been left to dry overnight. Just gonna remove this tape. If I just look at the joints, all of them came out really well, to be honest. There's hardly any gaps. There's no gaps at all, to be honest. The only thing I need to do is on the surface of this, I need to try and get this as flat as possible. The best way for me to do that is just put a bit of sandpaper on a flat surface and just surface and rub this against sandpaper for both sides, because I want to make sure when the lid goes on it's nice and flat and there's no gaps, because this will be glued, and then the lid will be split apart with the box. Using the bandsaw, I'll just make a cut all the way through. So I've got the lids, got the bases done. The base is just a plain simple piece of poplar there. And yeah, what I'll do, I'll glue that, and I've left them bigger on purpose, so I'll use my flush trim route bit just to get them nice and perfect shape. And then I would add a nice small chamfer to this edge at the bottom and for the top as well. So yeah, I'm going to flatten these off camera and then prepare the lids. So that came out really well. There's no gaps or anything around the edges. I had to make a slight change to this one because I ended up doing the lid for this slightly narrower than I needed. So what I've done instead, I've put a sort of a strip underneath the lid of the Purple Heart just to give it a bit of a contrast. And I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but once we get this side all nice and flush on all the edges, it should give it a nice finish. But we'll see how that comes out, and that was an error from my side. I didn't measure that correctly, but other than that, it came out pretty well. The joints are nice and tight. So the next thing is to get the edges nice and flush. I'm going to use a flush trim on my router to get those nice and flush for the lids and the bases, and then we can cut them apart and work out how we're going to fix the lids onto the actual boxes itself. I'm thinking of just having a push fit instead of putting some hinges because the woods are quite thin. So I'm going to give that a try, but first I need to trim up all of these and then we can get them cut apart for the lids. off camera, what I've done is I've just put this piece of wood here. It's a just a strip of scrap wood cut at 45 degrees, and I've just cut a groove with the blade so I can know exactly where the clearance is going to be. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this to allow me to cut some splines in the corners. But in order to do that, I'm just going to work out exactly where I want the splines, how many, and then all I need to do is just align my pencil marks to where the blade mark will be. So I'll just draw a little mark down here so I have a reference point so I can line up the edge of the box there, and I just got to hold this in place and run it through the table saw. I haven't got a spline jig made at the moment, so for now I'll have to use this, but in the future I will make a jig which I can make proper splines with, and I'll do that. I've already set the height of the blade to the correct thickness, which is the thickness of this piece and slightly under, just so it doesn't go through and make a hole. They don't need to be very deep because it's just going to add a little bit of strength to the joints, and also it's more of a decorative piece as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the areas where it will be cut, and then mark where I want the splines on each side, and then we'll go ahead and make the cuts. So off camera, what I've done, I've just put a pencil line all the way across around the piece to exactly define where I want the splines to be, and all I need to do is on this I just to line up this line to this line here each time and just make the cut. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt my first cut and see how that goes. So it's just a bit of a close-up of how it looks with the splines in. I have done them bigger than I need to. It's just that I will, as soon as they've dried overnight, I will then just use a flush saw and then get these cut away and sanded. So it's